Earlier in this training, you learned that prompts help fill the gap between the stimuli and the behavior so that students have access to the reinforcement. It's in this way that prompts help transfer stimulus control to the naturally occurring stimuli. One effective response prompting system that teachers use is called the system of least prompts. The system of least prompts first gives students an opportunity to respond on their own and then provides a prompt if needed. So what is the system of least prompts? The system of least prompts is a prompting system that uses different levels of sequence prompts to assist students with learning new skills. As teachers, you organize the prompts up to 3 in a hierarchy from least to most intrusive. The system of least prompts can be used to teach both discrete and chain skills. And in the system of least prompts, students can answer independently. They're given that opportunity. But if they need help, a prompt is delivered. It always ends with the correct response, and the last prompt in the hierarchy is called the controlling prompt. All correct responses are paired with a reinforcer, and errors are blocked and an error correction provided. To use the system of least prompts, first select 1 to 3 prompts to include in the hierarchy. The system of least prompts is appropriate for chain tasks, discrete tasks, and text comprehension. Chain tasks are tasks that contain a series of behaviors that are dependent on each other. For example, conducting a science experiment or solving a math equations problem are both chain tasks. Discrete tasks are tasks that have a clear beginning and ending. And examples of discrete tasks include vocabulary, word, and numeral recognition. For discrete or chain tasks, common prompts to include in the hierarchy are gesture, verbal, model, and physical. Notice that the prompts are organized from least to most intrusive prompts on this slide. That means that in this hierarchy, the gestural prompt gives students the least amount of support, and the physical prompt gives students the most. There are several prompts you could select from to include in the hierarchy, but you only want to include 1 to 3. The system of least prompts is also very effective in teaching text comprehension. The prompts in the hierarchy include the text that the student is reading. The least prompt is rereading a selection of the paragraph of the text again. If students need more help, the sentence with the correct answer is read again. And finally, if more help is still needed, the controlling prompt is delivered by telling and showing the student the correct answer. The controlling prompt in the hierarchy is the prompt that ensures the student says the correct answer. Here's an example of how to use the system of least prompts to teach a behavior. The cue is, what is 2 plus 3? A verbal prompt could be, count up from 2 on the number line. A model prompt could be, count up from 2 on the number line like this, 3, 4, 5. Or a physical prompt. Let's do it together. Take their hand, 3, 4, 5. The descriptive verbal praise would be, you're right, 3 plus 2 equals 5. Let's pause to check for understanding. For this activity, work in pairs and take turns being the teacher and the student. You'll use the system of least prompts to teach the math problem. The instructional cue is, what is 3 plus 3? There are 3 prompts in the SLP hierarchy: verbal, model, and physical. The descriptive verbal praise for a correct response is, yes, 3 plus 3 equals 6. Use the number line located in the left-hand pocket of your folder. When you're the student, wait to answer correctly until the controlling prompt, that is the physical prompt, is given, so that your teacher can practice all 3 prompts. And you have 4 minutes for this activity. Facilitators, please pause the recording now to give participants an opportunity to practice teaching the math problem using the system of least prompts. Earlier we talked about how the system of least prompts is effective in teaching a chain task. Here's a video demonstrating the importance of the task analysis when teaching a chain task. In this instance, a dad asks his kids to help him make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Facilitators, please pause the recording to play this video. When using the system of least prompts to teach a chain task, prompts can be applied to each step of the task analysis. For example, if the cue was solve the math problem, you would pause for an independent response. But if none came, you could give the verbal cue, put 3 manipulatives in the first set, and wait. If the student's not able to do it, then you give the model prompt, put 3 in the first set like this, show them how and pause. And if they still need more help, give them a physical prompt. Let's work together to put 3 in the first step. Guide their hands to put 3 in the first set. Good job, you're right. You put 3 in the first step. And then pause again for them to come in with the next step in the task analysis. If none comes, give a verbal cue, or a verbal prompt, sorry. Put 2 in the second set and wait. If they need more help, give them a model prompt. Put 2 in the second set like this. Show them how and pause. If they do it correctly, then give them the descriptive verbal praise. Good job, you're right. You put 2 in the second set and wait for the next step in the task analysis, for them to do the next step in the task analysis. Text prompts can be used to teach story comprehension, as we talked about earlier. Here's an example. We have adapted text from the Watsons Go to Birmingham. Here's what it would look like. Here's the text. My name is Kenny, and this story is about my family. I have an older brother named Byron and a younger sister named Joetta. We call her Joey for short. We live in Michigan with our mama and dad. Here's where you're going to stop to ask the comprehension question. Where do the Watsons live? Wait for them to answer correctly, but if they're unable to, then for the first prompt, you would reread the paragraph and ask the question again, what we just read, and ask the question again. For the second prompt, you'll hone it down slightly and reread just the sentence with the correct answer and ask the question again. And if they still need more help to answer correctly, you're going to tell them and show them and ask the question again. Get them to repeat it back to you. The Watsons, where do the Watsons live? They live in Michigan. Good job, you're right. The Watsons live in Michigan. Because you're adding in prompts with the system of least prompts, those prompts have to be faded. Unfortunately for teachers, the prompts in the system of least prompts are self-fading. That means you really don't have to give a lot of thought to it, because as the students respond independently, less and less assistance from you is needed. And those prompts just fade away on their own. You promote self-fading with descriptive verbal praise. Let's pause to check for understanding. For this activity, you'll work individually to prepare the text for teaching comprehension using the system of least prompts. There are 3 prompts in your hierarchy, as described on this slide. In your folder, locate handouts 1 and 2, read the selection of the Abraham Lincoln story, and highlight prompt 1, underline prompt 2, and circle prompt 3. You'll use this adapted text for a later activity. Facilitators, please pause the recording to give participants an opportunity to prepare the adapted text. When teaching students with extensive support needs, it's important to know your students well and use this knowledge in your lessons. Talk to their friends, their family members, their siblings, to discover things about them that you don't know, such as their interests, their strengths, their needs. Then use this information when creating lessons for them. Reinforcement is an important part of teaching. When first teaching a skill, you want to reinforce every correct response. Reinforcement can include praise or tangibles, but remember to look at the outcome, what happens when you deliver the reinforcement. It should increase desired behavior or decrease undesired behavior. Descriptive verbal praise is an incredibly effective way to reinforce correct responses. With descriptive verbal praise, you repeat back to the learner what it is they got correct. So, for example, good job, you're right, you found number 2, the number 2 on the number line. Instructive feedback is similar but a little bit different because it gives information on non-targeted behavior, such as this example. Good job. You put $1 in the slot. That's what you wanted them to do. Then you add on some additional instructive feedback. You could also put 4 quarters because 4 quarters is equivalent to $1. This is not instruction that you're targeting, right? But you're including it in your feedback statement, and students will learn this information just simply because you're repeating it back to them, along with the descriptive verbal praise. Descriptive verbal praise is so important for student learning. It repeats the correct answer in the verbal feedback to students. Hearing the correct answer again promotes learning. For example, if the comprehension question was who planted the garden, and the student says Anton, you could deliver a descriptive verbal praise statement that goes, good job, you're right. Anton is the person who planted the garden. Let's pause to check for understanding. For this activity, you'll work individually to write a descriptive verbal praise statement for the Abraham Lincoln adapted text question on handout 2. Where was Abraham Lincoln born? Use handout 3 in the folder to write the descriptive verbal praise statement. You'll have 3 minutes to complete this activity. Facilitators, please pause the recording now to give participants an opportunity to write a descriptive verbal praise statement. It's also important to fade the reinforcement that you are delivering to students during instruction. The goal of instruction is to transfer the stimulus control to the target stimulus so that the student responds to the naturally occurring stimuli and not your prompt. After a student has acquired the behavior, fade the reinforcement given, perhaps to instead of every time, every third time the behavior occurs, or even on average, every third response. That means when using the system of least prompts at the beginning of skill acquisition, you'll reinforce every correct response, regardless of the prompt needed to get the correct response. Then as students begin to make responses on their own correctly, without prompting, you'll only deliver reinforcement for independent correct responses to fade the reinforcement you're delivering. Eventually, the naturally occurring reinforcement will be all that is needed to sustain the student's behavior. Errors are also a part of instruction. And when an error happens, deliver an error correction and continue with instruction. An error correction tells the student the correct response. So for example, if the student says cat for can, the teacher says it's can. Say can. Don't pay a lot of attention to errors, but do focus on the correct responses. And definitely don't beg students to respond or give lots of hints. Hints aren't prompts. Well, let's pause again to check for understanding. For this activity, you'll work individually to write an error correction statement for the Abraham Lincoln adapted text question, where was Abraham Lincoln born? Use handout 3 again from your folder to write the error correction statement. You have 3 minutes to complete this activity. Facilitators, please pause the recording now to give participants an opportunity to write an error correction statement. Let's watch a video of a teacher using a read aloud of an adapted story and the system of least prompts to teach story comprehension to a learner with extensive support needs. In this video, the adapted story is Because of Winn-Dixie. Notice that the student has a copy of the adapted story in front of her and that the teacher uses text pointing to encourage the learner to follow along as she reads the story aloud. What you don't see in this video, for the sake of time, is that the teacher has already read the story aloud once without stopping to promote the learner's comprehension. Now the teacher is reading the story again and stopping at pre-selected points to ask a comprehension question. This teacher also uses a repeating storyline, and he smiled, to engage the learner and promote comprehension. A repeating storyline is a summary line from the story that the students read with the teacher. This learner is verbal, but a repeating storyline can also be used and recorded with a voice output device for nonverbal learners. Also notice the teacher delivers descriptive verbal praise for each correct response. Facilitators, please pause the recording and play the video. In the video you just watched, the learner didn't need any help to answer the comprehension questions because she answered them correctly on her own. But what if a learner can't answer the comprehension questions on their own? That's where the system of least prompts is used. In this next video, you'll see how text prompts are used to promote text comprehension when the learner can't answer on their own. This lesson was delivered virtually, so it looks a little different than a lesson delivered in person, but the system of least prompts are the same. Facilitator, please pause the recording and play the video on the next slide. It's incredibly important to collect data on our instruction. Here is an example of a system of least prompts data collection sheet. Let's look at what it looks like with some data on it. When using SLP to teach text comprehension, you can personalize this data sheet by adding your comprehension questions. You can add or subtract rows as needed. Notice that there are 3 questions in this lesson. The first question was, how did Billy scare off the dogs that were fighting? And the student, you can tell, was able to answer after delivering prompt 1, which was rereading the text and re-asking the question. For the second question, how long ago did Billy have his hound dogs? The student made an error, as indicated on the data sheet. And for the third question, what animal left tracks by the river? The student was able to answer after the second prompt, which was rereading the sentence with the correct answer. You can total up the percentages of correct responding at the bottom and graph any independent correct responses. Now it's time for you and a partner to practice using the system of least prompts to teach story comprehension. The directions for the activity are on handout 5 in your folder, and you'll use the materials you prepared earlier in this presentation. Take turns being the teacher and the learner, and practice this activity several times in your role. When you are the student, provide the teacher an opportunity to deliver each level of the prompt and an error correction procedure before switching roles. When you're the teacher, deliver descriptive verbal praise for each correct response and use the data sheet to record the student's responses. Please note that typically you would not read the same text and ask the same question over and over during a lesson. You're being asked to do that in this way today to help you become familiar and comfortable with delivering the SLP prompts, the descriptive verbal praise, and the error correction procedure. You have 12 minutes for this practice. You have 12 minutes for this activity and to practice each role. Facilitators, please pause the recording now to give participants an opportunity to practice. Then use the debrief slide to talk with participants about how well it went and what they still need more information about. Another effective response prompting system is time delay, when students need help to respond correctly to stimuli. Today we're going to talk specifically about constant time delay. So what is time delay? Well, time delay can be used to teach discrete or chain behaviors, just like the system of least prompts. Prompts are fated with increments of time, usually between 0 seconds and 5 seconds. The instruction always begins with the 0-second delay trials. Then you move to the delay trials. Each second is counted as 1001. Constant time delay is considered an errorless learning strategy. In the constant time delay, all correct responses are paired with a reinforcer, just like the system of least prompts, and errors are blocked and an error correction is provided when needed. Let's look at the steps involved in the constant time delay. Step 1 is securing the student's attention with a general or specific attention cue, such as ready or look at me. Step 2 involves presenting the target stimulus, which is what you're teaching, and the task direction. which is what you want them to do, together. So for receptive responses, you might show a learner an array, such as 1 through 4, and say, touch or show me 3. For expressive responding, you could show a number and say, and ask really, what number, or read the number. It's important to understand that receptive responses do not require students to verbalize a response. And expressive responding requires students to verbalize or use a voice output device to indicate a response. For step 3, you're going to wait the designated interval for students to respond. For 0-second delay trials, the target stimulus and the prompt are presented together. The prompt for a receptive response at 0-second delay would be the teacher pointing to 3 and saying 3 together. A prompt for expressive responding would be the teacher saying 3 and then having the student follow suit by saying 3. For 5-second delay trials, or delay trials in general, they don't have to be 5 seconds. You present the target stimulus and wait however many seconds your delay trial is before prompting. It's important to remember that you don't provide additional prompts and that you deliver several 0-second delay trials before moving to the delay trials. The 0-second delay trials is where students are learning the correct response. Then once you move to the delay trials, don't go back to the 0-second delay trials unless the learner has a lot of errors. And always record student responses as you go. In step 4, when the students respond correctly, you're going to deliver that descriptive verbal praise that repeats what the students did correctly. Good job, pointing to 3. When students make an error, you're going to deliver the controlling prompt, which is the answer, usually. This is 3, point to 3, and have the student provide the correct response back to you so that you can deliver the descriptive verbal praise. Remind students to wait if they don't know, and you will help them. You really don't want students guessing in constant time delay, because if they guess, they'll make errors. Here's another look at descriptive verbal praise. First, you want to give affirmation, good job, you're right, and then repeat the correct response back to them. The word is disease. Here's another look at error correction procedure. You want to say the correct response. The word is disease. Then give the student an opportunity to say it correctly. Your turn. Read the word. They say disease. After the correct response, you delivered the descriptive verbal praise and possibly the definition. I know the box says the definition, but that's that indirect learning that makes your instruction so much more efficient. So if you want, you can deliver some incidental information along with that descriptive verbal praise. In the next video, the instruction focuses on delivering 0-second constant time delay trials to a high school aged learner who is learning key vocabulary words he'll use in his general education health class. The learner is verbal, so expressive responding is appropriate. His teacher has selected 10 vocabulary words from the health unit and created cards that have the word paired with the picture on them. She also put the definition on the back of the card so she could teach the definition in the feedback statement. Remember, that definition written on the back of the card is just for the teacher. Notice the cue she uses is read the word and not say the word. It's important to keep an academic focus to our instruction versus students just parroting what we say, as say the word implies. Also notice the descriptive verbal praise the teacher has planned to deliver for correct responses. Facilitators, pause the recording now to play the video on the next slide. In the next video, the constant time delay instruction focuses on comprehension of the key vocabulary words the student is learning. Comprehension of the word is different from word recognition. A picture word match activity and receptive responding are used. The cue is show me whatever the word is, and descriptive verbal praise is delivered for correct responses. The video also talks about scoring a student's responses. We haven't covered that yet, so don't let that bother you. We'll get to it next. Facilitators, please pause the recording and play the video on the next slide. Here's an example of what a constant time delay data sheet can look like. I'm going to go to the next slide and show you and tell you all the different types of student responses there are. But you can see in this key that there is a correct response, an incorrect response, and a no response. And also notice that there are columns for before the prompt and after the prompt. That becomes very important. So here are the 5 possible student responses in constant time delay. You can have a correct after the prompt, and that's where the students have waited and then said the correct response. All right. You can also have an incorrect response after the prompt. So the student waited, you said the prompt, but they said it incorrectly after you. The student can also score a correct before the prompt. This is really what you're going for. These are the responses that count toward mastery, and they can't happen during 0-second delay trials because you're immediately pairing the prompt with the stimuli. But when they can tell you the correct response before the prompt, that's when they say the word before you tell them. And they can also have an incorrect response before the prompt. That's where they didn't wait and they got the wrong answer. They didn't wait for a prompt and they got the wrong answer. They can also have a no response. So here's a look at our data sheet again. Notice the key at the bottom in the blue box. You've got a plus, a minus, or an NA. All right, 3 different types of responses from the students. At the top, in the yellow box, you have a delay. That means you indicate whatever delay instruction you are. If you're in 0-second delay trials, put 0 seconds up there. If you're in a delay trial, put whatever delay it is that you're waiting before giving the prompt. In the red box, you'll see where you list the trials. That's where you put whatever stimuli it is you're teaching. And the green box indicates that they say the answer before the prompt, before you do, or after the prompt, after you tell them they say the correct answer. Again, during 0-second delay trials, you can't have any before the prompt responses because you're telling them immediately the answer. Now let's check your understanding of scoring. During 0-second delay trials, what column will you use to record students' responses on the data sheet? Will it be before the prompt or after the prompt? Turn to a partner and discuss, and then share your answer with the group. Facilitators, please pause the recording now to give participants an opportunity to discuss an answer. In this next video, the teacher is teaching the student important vocabulary that the student will encounter in the adapted story because of Winn-Dixie. 5 vocabulary words were selected: Winn-Dixie, smile, grocery store, Florida, and preacher. The video is recorded during a session with several teachers when several teachers are teaching their lessons, so there's some background noise, much like a real classroom. The teacher is also teaching incidental information in the feedback statement for each trial. The incidental information is the definition of the vocabulary word. While this information is not directly taught, embedding incidental information in this way is a great way to make your teaching more efficient. You get more bang for your buck, in other words. These trials are 0-second delay trials, so the learner doesn't have an opportunity to make a mistake because they are prompted with the correct response immediately. With 0-second delay trials, there is no error correction needed. The teacher collects data as she goes along. All right, facilitators, please pause the recording and play the video on the next slide. Now it's time for you and a partner to practice using constant time delay to teach nonsense vocabulary words. The directions for this activity are in the right-hand side of your folder on Handout 7. Gather the constant time delay data sheet, which is Handout 6, and the set of 5 nonsense words to use during this activity. You can also refer to slides 55 through 60 for the constant time delay steps, if needed. Now, before beginning, organize your cards in the order in which they appear on the data sheet. And since you're delivering 0-second delay trials, where you are saying the correct response with the stimulus, there should not be any errors. That's important. When you're the student, you shouldn't be making any errors, all right? Also important, when you are practicing constant time delay with nonsense words, you should say the word on the back of the card and not the nonsense word itself. Nonsense words are necessary in this activity because everyone here is an independent reader and would not experience the transfer of stimulus control if regular words were used because you all know how to read. For example, if the nonsense word is yid, Y-I-D, and the word on the back of the card is apple, when delivering instruction during the 0-second delay, you'd say something like this. The teacher says, read the word apple. The student replies, apple. The teacher says, good job, you're right. The word is apple. Notice I didn't say yid in there anywhere. Then record the student's response on the data sheet, handout 6. Stop after you've delivered the 10th 0-second delay trial, all right, and make sure you switch roles. You have 10 minutes for this activity. Facilitators, please pause the recording now to give participants an opportunity to practice. Then use the debrief slide to talk with participants about what went well and what they still need more information about. Great work practicing with your partner, the nonsense words with 0-second delay trials. Now in the next video, you'll see the teacher again, who is teaching her student to read important vocabulary from the adapted story Because of Winn-Dixie. But this time, though, she waits 5 seconds after presenting the cue, read the word, and the stimulus before she delivers the prompt. This gives the student the opportunity to read the word before being prompted, if she knows the word. Notice the directions that the teacher gives to the student before beginning the constant time delay trials. The teacher encourages her to say the word if she knows it, but not to guess. If she doesn't know the word, she should just wait for help. The teacher again delivers descriptive verbal praise after the correct responses and embeds incidental information in the feedback statement to make her instruction more efficient. Facilitators, please pause the recording and play the video now. Now it's time for you and a partner to practice using constant time delay to teach nonsense words to each other. The directions for this activity are in the right-hand side of the folder in handout 8. Gather the constant time delay data sheet, handout 6, and the set of 5 nonsense words you just used. You can refer to slides 55 through 60 if needed. Before beginning, let me remind you to organize the cards in the order they appear on the data sheet. This makes data collection a little easier. And remember to teach the word on the back of the card and not the nonsense word. Record student responses on the data sheet, which is handout 6. Remember, their responses can be correct or incorrect before or after the prompt. Only score the student response once. In other words, don't score the error correction. We do want you to make some errors at this time, students. Deliver descriptive verbal praise for correct responses and error correction for errors. Stop after you've each delivered 10 3-second delay trials. You'll have 10 minutes for this activity. Facilitators, please pause the recording now to give participants an opportunity to practice. Then use the debrief slide to talk with participants about what went well and what they still need more information about.